Saturday morning to join us for our first session of the Parents Guide to Series of 2023. I am Nur Shafika from Mendaki, and it gives me great pleasure to be your MC today. So today we are here for a session on youth and about understanding our youth. So maybe I'll just like to ask before we start the session, parents, how many of you here, you do not understand your teens, you do not understand your youth? Just drop in the chat how many of you don't understand what is going on with your kids. Anyone or everybody here understands perfectly about your kids, you know exactly what's going on with their lives. I see a few hands up. Okay, so I'm sure some of you here are concerned and very, very worried parents of a lot of teenagers, it seems. So you are here at the right place. We have our wonderful, wonderful speaker here, Mr. Henry, who has a ton of experience dealing or helping teenagers, and perhaps he can maybe share some of his tips as a parent to a tween, I think a 12-year-old, maybe just somebody in the cusp of that teenagehood, so maybe he can share some of his tips as a parent himself. So parents, you need to understand that you are not alone. There's so many of you here just wondering also what is going on with your teens. And I understand that as well. So don't worry, we are all here. We hope to address all of your concerns. And I hope that this session is an entry point for you to maybe understand a little bit more about your children and how you can be better and more supportive parents for them. So before we begin, do like and follow our Facebook and Instagram pages. We will be posting the takeaways from today's session. So be sure to follow us, because we will share some parenting tips from this session and even all our other programs and events. You want to get latest updates on our events so you don't miss them, events such as our Parents Guide to Series for our next sessions, and also other events and programs happening in Mendaki. We will also update you on scholarships and bursaries, and you wouldn't want to miss out on that. So parents, again, one more time, if you have any questions, any doubts, any concerns, anything, throughout the session, please do post them on the Zoom chat box function. Make sure that you send it to everyone so that everyone is able to see. Don't just send it to the co-host or to the speaker, because he will not be able to see your questions. So just share it on chat to everyone, and then we will address it later during the session. So this morning, we are very happy to have with us our guest speaker, Mr. Hendriawan Selamat, who will help our fellow parents here understand more about your teens, understand what they're going through, all the transitions that is happening within them, all the emotions and the hormones and all the challenges that we face. And I hope Mr. Henry is just the right person for this. He will also introduce tips for us parents to support our children as they navigate all the transitions and to create a more positive home environment. So before that, let's just get to know a little bit about Mr. Henry. So Mr. Henry here is a senior guidance specialist with the guidance branch at MOE. His current interest lies in the social and emotional development of children and adolescents, with a focus on cyber wellness and its intersection with mental health. And I think cyber wellness is something that I think parents, you are not quite sure what is happening online, what is happening on the laptop. Your child is always on his phone or on her phone, on her laptop, behind closed doors. So he is just the right person to share with you what goes on a little bit there. Mr. Henry also studied civil engineering before venturing into education, and he read human development and psychology at Harvard Graduate School of Education. So before joining guidance branch, he was teaching physics and mathematics at the secondary school level. Secondary school, all that teenagers go a bit crazy there. So he's just the right person. His work at guidance branch involves curriculum development, professional development of educators, developing parent resources and research. And he's currently a member of the Screen Time Expert subgroup under the Child and Maternal Health and Wellbeing Task Force. So as I mentioned just now, Mr. Henry is also a father. He has two children, a daughter who is 12 years old and a son in primary 2. So parents, if you have any struggles or any challenges on how to behave with your children or how to help your children, maybe later on you can just ask a question to Mr. Henry. How is it that he does it at home? How does he build a good environment at home? So Mr. Henry, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our Parents Guide to series today. How are you, Mr. Henry?
Oh, very good. Thank you, Noshafka, for the wonderful introduction. Very good morning, everyone. Uh, Let me share my slides to
So
begin.
before that, Mr. Henry,
Oh,
I
yes.
understand that you have a whole lot of experience in your career and as well as a father, right? So I'm sure you understand just some of the struggles that our parents are facing, about maybe children who are not willing to speak up. Every time you speak to them, the answer is just how are you doing today? Have you eaten? How was school today? Right? And then always behind closed doors. So I'm sure you have had that share of experience as well, Mr. Henry.
Oh, yes, yes, very much so. I think one of the challenges that my wife and I are facing is the fact that my daughter now is grown up already, growing up. And so it's a transition that we all getting used to. She wants a little bit more of her own time. Sometimes she is less willing to share some of the things that she has experienced or she has struggles with. But I think it is a journey that all parents struggle with. You make it sound like I have all the answers. No, I also don't. I also struggle equally as much. But I do hope like some of my experiences will be very useful for the parents here as well.
Right, great. So I think the parents do not want to hear me speak anymore. They want to hear you. So please, Mr. Henry, take it away and share with us.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Shafika. There we go. All right, again, a very good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and really just want to thank Mendaki for allowing MOE the opportunity to share a little bit more about how we support your teenage or your twin child in school. We recognize that adolescence can be a very trying period for both the child and the parent. Like what I shared earlier on, yeah, the kids are growing up. What are we going to do about it, right? And I hope that with today's sharing, you're able to understand a little bit more about what MOE is doing for your child and be in a better position to support them through their challenges through adolescence. So to start with, so this is just a quick presentation outline. I'm going to be talking a little bit about adolescent development. Just sharing with parents why teens are behaving in such a way. Following that, I'll be talking a little bit about MOE efforts pertaining to the Character and Citizenship or CCE curriculum, and then how and why it is important that the CCE curriculum actually teaches students social emotional skills and cyber wellness as well. And we will round off today's session by sharing resources for parents from MOE and from our other partners, as well as, more importantly, the time for Q&A. Right, so I think let's start with adolescent development. To really understand why your teen is behaving this way, it's really a good idea to look at what research has to say with regard to that. Now, according to the WHO, World Health Organization, adolescence is the period of life between 10 and 20 years of age. Now, it's a period that it's a crucial period fraught with transitions, right? I mentioned earlier, like my child is not small anymore, lah, nak besar kan. So from childhood to adulthood, then there are changes and stresses that they experience, and there will be significant challenges and changes, including changes to the cognitive state, moral. There's also biological developments, right? We have puberty coming in, as well as psychological and social changes as well. And it is during this period that young people, they actually develop that sense of abstract thinking. They develop a clearer sense of identity, and they are starting to increase their independence from their parents. But the good news is that for a majority of young people, majority of adolescents, they are actually able to negotiate through this space well. But we need to acknowledge that there will be some who encounter major disruptions in this development. So let me just share a little bit about how this period of adolescence is a time for identity formation, a time for them to assert independence and changing relationships. A season for vulnerability and experimentation, and a time for setting the stage for the future, right? So adolescence is a time for identity formation. Now you start to develop a heightened sense of self-consciousness. They start to reconsider themselves as they become more aware of the broader society, including the values, the norms and expectations. So it's no longer just like within a family, right? What ayah say or what ibu say. and that's it. So now they're really being a little bit aware of what is happening broadly, and it's not something that adolescents just do on their own. Identity formation is something that is deeply social, and hinges on social validation. There is social consequences, and of course there are promises and risks associated with it. Now, this is where adolescents also start to experiment with different roles and personalities to find out where they fit in society, because they want to try a few things. This is like, am I this person? Am I that person? Multiple roles. They are the son, but they are also the student, but they are also the friend, but they are also, some of them might be CCA leaders. How does all of this play a role? Now, it's identity exploration and formation is facilitated by this idea of self-expression, self-reflection, and like what I mentioned earlier, feedback from others. They take a lot of reference from the people around them, and they seek out role models. So your role as a parent then becomes even greater, right? As well as the teachers and educators in school. And they start to think of questions, and they start looking for answers to questions such as, who am I? How do other people see me? Right? When they were younger, all that don't care. No, I just do my own thing, happy, happy. But then now they are like a bit more concerned about how other people see them. They start questioning about, what are they good at or what are they weak in. And I think more importantly, they start questioning where they're going in life. Now, this whole entire journey of identity formation has a lot of implications on their self-esteem, self-efficacy, and well-being. So those who actually settle into their identity, I think it will lead to positive mental health outcomes. Those who struggle, right, might lead to those who struggle with finding their identity, they may lead they may become a bit more confused, and because of that they withdraw, they isolate from their peers because they don't know where they fit in, or they might just try to immerse themselves fully into the world of their peers, and then they lose their own identity, and that's not good because that also impacts their well-being. So adolescence, this period is also when you start to assert their independence, and this will of course result in changes in their relationship. I think some of you, myself also can attest, like why my daughter study the mood and the stance and how she talked to me also changed, right? But that's what happens when they start asserting their independence, and you will expect changes in the relationship. They want to be more independent. They want to make their own decisions. They want to be their own person. They want to have more say in the things that they want to do. And like what I mentioned, it might have increased conflicts between yourself and your child as well. But beyond that, we are also expecting more conflicts between their peers as well, adolescents and teachers as well. So they just want to have their own voice, and in terms of asserting their voice, we should come to expect that there will be some challenges and changes in the relationships. We also recognize that peers become more important and exert a greater influence on them. The thing is, while we talked about identity formation, their peers, our children start finding their own peer groups and cliques by the time that they are 14 and 15. That's sort of stabilized, and that's because they kind of like know where they fit in the whole entire the broader societal structure, right? But they're in school, so they will be in multiple cliques, like within a classroom. They have a group of friends within CCA, and this actually helps them develop their identity in school. So now they know who they are as a student in a specific school. Now, these peers, of course, can encourage the positive pro-social behaviors, but then we also again need to acknowledge that there are some who might encourage those anti-social behaviors that we all don't like lah. So and this also leads on very nicely to our next point on the fact that we need to recognize that adolescence is a period of vulnerability for and experimentation for our children. Now, as mentioned earlier, peers become increasingly important and they exert a great influence, and adolescents are a little bit more prone to recklessness and risk-taking behavior, and this may influence or it may pressure them into doing dangerous things or harmful things. There's actually a neuroscience response to this. In terms of brain development, when our brain develops and continue to develop its structures, there is a slight differentiation between the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that looks at decision making, responsible decision making, that looks at controlling or managing some of these behaviors, right? There's a difference between the age development versus the development of the limbic system, which is more emotional, impulsive. So in terms of growth trajectory, the limbic system is developing, especially at the teenage periods, a little bit faster than the prefrontal cortex. And so you have that little bit of that gap whereby students are a little bit more prone to be a bit more impulsive, a little bit more emotional. And there's a little bit of challenge in trying to pull back some of their excitement, some of their impulsive behaviors. But it's not saying they can't. They just need to have a right strategy to do that, right? Also, earlier I talked about puberty as a biological change that the teens are going through. So when it comes along, we also see struggles with in terms of weight. Suddenly they're gaining weight or they're not gaining enough weight. So either or, also not happy. With self-esteem issues, self-image issues, and this is because there's social comparison becomes a little bit more like what I mentioned earlier, identity formation. They are looking at where they fit in the whole entire society. This becomes a little bit more issue. And we realize that again, with all of these challenges, there again, we acknowledge that there are some adolescents who actually struggle with their mental health. However, beyond all this vulnerability, experimentation, and I talk about all these problematic concerns, it is also a period where they start thinking about their future a little bit more. And they start to think about, what they can do when they grow up, what job they want to do, and how they can spend time a bit more meaningfully. And this is important because it allows us to have the opportunity at that time, when we are able to engage our teens to start talking about what's next, what's for the future, right? Now, recognizing all of these challenges, MOE has actually put in multiple efforts to actually help the adolescents rise above and meet their social and emotional needs. So, like what I mentioned earlier, the first effort is our character and citizenship or CCE education. Now, or CCE curriculum, sorry. Now, in designing the CCE curriculum, we take into account the developmental and social emotional needs of our students at different age groups. The latest refresh, which we affectionately call CCE 2021, no difference. It was announced in 2020 that we'll be reviewing it. And I think it's important to realize that we also realized that we needed a review and a refresh so that we can better prepare our students for the complexities of the fast changing social paradigm. So now, like what Shafika mentioned, social media, digital technology becomes that great it has that great impact on our youth and our adolescents. So what can we do about it? How can we better equip our students with skills so that they are actually able to manage this? So we wanted to be able to manage the offline as well as the online aspect of that so that they can be able to make better decisions. And I think what we hope to develop in students through the curriculum is, of course, good character, resilience and social emotional well-being, future readiness, active citizenship. I'll just talk a little bit more about good character and resilience and social emotional well-being a little. So we want our students to have actually a strong moral compass so that they get a good sense of what's right and wrong, so that they're able to think critically, ethically, be discerning in judgment. That's very important nowadays. We also want them to be able to take responsibility for their choices and actions and be caring towards others and strive for excellence. Why is resilience and social emotional well-being important? Because we want them to have that balanced sense of self. Healthy relationships, be resilient when faced with challenges, and have that sense of gratitude and appreciation. Right. On future readiness, like what was mentioned, they are a bit more primed to talk about future. So let's have more conversations with that in CCE. And in terms of active citizenship, we do want them to develop a strong national identity. Now, just so you know, as of last year, we have fully implemented CCE 2021 in secondary schools, Sec 1 to Sec 5. This year, all primary schools have been are doing the revised CCE curriculum, and at the JC and PU levels, we will fully implement it by the end of this year. And if you look at the diagram here, that little pentagon there, that is our CCE curriculum frame, and you see that social emotional learning, or SEL, is at its core. And you see around it, cyber wellness education features as a content area alongside other areas such as mental health, family education, and national education. So this leads me to the next part where I just going to quickly talk about social emotional skills. Now, SE skills, social emotional or SE skills, they are soft skills, and these are actually essential for a child's personal growth and well-being. So we talk about the hard skills in education, like literacy. Can they read? Can they do mathematics and things like that? So those are the hard skills. But the soft skills, which we realize, and I'm sure you realize as well, is also equally important. Um, it's useful to actually look and ensuring that your child actually has good holistic development. Now, SEL, social emotional learning, undergirds the whole entire CCE 2021, and it's really critical to address the social emotional needs of our students, especially at adolescents. And these SE skills are taught alongside our CCE core values of respect, responsibility, resilience, integrity, care, and harmony. And this social emotional learning covers the interconnected key competencies of self-awareness, social awareness, relationship management, self-management, and is that responsible decision making. So why is this important? So just a little bit about when it is being taught. Students are taught and learn these SE skills through the CCE lessons, and CCE lessons happen during curriculum time and student experiences that are beyond the classroom. So like CCA, school-based initiative, teachable moments, learning opportunities beyond the skills. So nearly all of the experiences that the students actually encounter in school will be opportunities for them to actually learn social emotional skills. And again, like what I mentioned earlier, these skills are actually important so that your child can help can develop healthy identities so that they are able to recognize and manage their own emotions. They have that sense of responsibility. They have they have that sense of responsibility, care, and concern for others. They're able to relate with others and develop positive relationships. More importantly, they're able to handle challenges. They're able to make responsible decisions and act for good of self and others in the society. This, of course, helps them be holistically better. So, in terms of skills associated with self-management, so that's one of the SE skills that I talked about. One of the basket of skills. So, skills associated with self-management actually helps them better regulate their emotions. So why is that important? Because if you are better able to regulate your emotions and your thoughts and your behaviors, so that might lead to positive personal well-being. They're actually able to rationalize intrusive thoughts. They're actually able to manage relationships better because they're not getting angry so easily. And that allows them to demonstrate really good pro-social behaviors and be actually and choose to be their best selves. Now, moving on to cyber wellness education and why that's important, because the SE skills that I shared earlier on will also equip students with skills that apply in cyber wellness. So what is cyber wellness education in the curriculum in CCE 2021 and what does it entail? So cyber wellness education focuses on the well-being of our students as they navigate cyberspace and continues to be premised on the importance of respect for self and others, both online and offline. And our students, we hope to nurture them to be safe and respectful and responsible users of cyberspace and also be a positive peer influence, because we really need more people in cyberspace to be upstanders. And this is important because digital technology has become so much a part of our student lives. You also realize, right? My daughter also perpetually, we try our best, but she's also on her devices quite a lot. We recognize that digital technology has been part of our students' lives. They live and they learn with it, right? They stay connected with your friends and your family through the technology and social media. When they need to organize themselves for some cause or meaningful cause, they do it through social media, and they rally one another through social media as well. Now, recognizing that technology has transformed the lives of our young people, we kind of need to do a bit of something. Because while we see how youth will be able to harness the potential that technology has, we also need to help them see how technology and social media can actually have some downsides. So we hope to help students cope with this pervasiveness of the digital lifestyle and issues associated with it. So the SE skills that I talk about is going to help them be able to adapt better and thrive in this new normal, recognize risks of the digital space, identify and discern negative influences and inappropriate websites, and manage excessive use of social media. As we recognize that all of these actually does have an impact on their social emotional well-being. So cyber wellness education, we focus on three key messages. We really want our students to embrace the use of technology while maintaining that balanced lifestyle between offline and online activities. We teach them to be safe and responsible users of technology and maintain that positive presence online. And we also impress upon them that they actually need to be responsible for their own personal well-being in cyberspace. I think even more so because there isn't anyone there to tell them off most of the time when they're doing something wrong or inappropriate. So it is really a lot about it is about their own personal responsibility when they're online. Now, similar to other CCE content areas, cyber wellness education is conducted through CCE lessons and student development experience, and they are roughly organized into 5 topics. Here we talk about cyber use, cyber identity, cyber relationships, cyber citizenships, and cyber ethics. Now on cyber use, like what you see on screen, is really about maintaining the healthy balance between online and offline activities. So we teach them a little bit on impulse control, how to manage their time, and recognizing its importance to their well-being. On cyber identity, we talked about how they can develop healthy online identities and how then to engage in appropriate online expressions. The whole idea of developing an healthy online identity is important because we recognize that when you're on social media, for example, there is a lot of social comparisons that take place, and that is actually quite unhealthy, and we need them to be able to manage that. On cyber relationships, so a lot of this pertains to netiquette or how to behave appropriately online. We talk about cyberbullying, and really the idea of helping them develop skills so that they can keep themselves safe and be respectful and develop some meaningful relationships online. And lastly, on cyber ethics, so this is really about learning the value of respect for others in terms of intellectual property, copyright, and the importance of creating or sharing content in a responsible manner. So what I've covered so far is I've talked about what's adolescent development, and then what MOE has been doing with regard to the CCE curriculum, and then where social emotional skills come into play, and how social emotional skills actually reside in cyber wellness, and how they can use those competencies or skills to actually help them become a better digital citizen. Now that we've shared some of these, I think what's important is we share a little bit more about the role that parents can play. I think very important is that in MOE, we strongly believe that parents play that key role in your child's development and growth, and you are invaluable partners and role models for supporting your child's learning and behavior, especially in the digital space. So then the question is, what can you do at home? So what can you do at home? I think the first thing that we want to talk about in terms of parenting in the digital age, right, or digital space, is role modeling. Role modeling cyber safety. So to role model cyber safety, we need to develop good cyber habits and highlight to our children the importance of privacy. So, like for example, when you are creating new passwords, or something that you're logging into, and they ask you to create a new account, you can share with them some of the good habits that you have, right? So like one of the bad habits that I try very hard to not do is having the same password for everything. Yeah, because it's a very common thing that a lot of my friends they also do, because it's just convenient. But then being mindful of some of these things, I do actively share with my kids. Now, just be mindful, when you have new passwords, this is what you want to do. Think about 12 letters, alphanumeric, passphrases are a good thing. So that's one of the things that we want to try to role model to our kids. Also very important, be mindful about when you post about your children. Remember recently there's this big hoo-ha about Sharon thing, right? There's a lot of traction on this influencer mother who was posting about their child. So Sharon thing, be mindful about what you post about your children, and share with your children why that is something that you are concerned about, so that they have a good idea of what are some of the implications when they post like that, or especially when they want to start posting on about your friends, or they're like tagging their friends and their peers. So get them to think about that a little bit more. Right, we also want to encourage our kids to be discerning and fact check information that they encounter online. Like I teach my kids, I teach my P2 son how to Google stuff, because I don't know all the answers, right? So just Google, and then I'm beside him as he's Googling, and then we'll see what whether some of the questions that he's asking, whether it's responded to in a good way, or there's like, I suspect the answer for this. National Library Board, NLB, they actually have this acronym called SURE, which stands for SURE. So it stands for Source, Understand, Research, Evaluate. So it's a way to teach your child and yourself as well to verify sources and the intent of the information that you see online. So like, is source, is the information trustworthy, credible, right? So just because your auntie, for example, your auntie sent in a group chat that there is something that is happening somewhere, is the source valid? Do we want to try to find a little bit more? And do you understand is really about trying to appreciate and understand whether or not what you're reading is actually facts or opinions. R stands for research. It's always useful to dig a bit deeper, go beyond the original source, see whether whatever is being shared has is similar, has multiple sources as well, and evaluate. And ultimately, after you see everything, your child and yourself also would kind of need to know, come to a decision of whether what you see or what you read, is that truthful, is that not truthful? How just be discerning about some of these things lah. And lastly, in terms of role modeling cyber safety, it's important for us to guide our children on how to explore digital frontiers and stay safe online. So like what I mentioned earlier, like when I asked my son to let's Google this, I'm at his site, and I together with him, I help him use like Google and try to find out how to do some of these things. If there are certain things that pop up, I'm there to be able to tell him how to manage some of these things. Sometimes because my daughter already have handphone, and she gets scam messages, right, on WhatsApp, on text messages, then we actually sit down, we talk about how do you know it's a scam, right? Scam Shield, yeah, I need to talk about Scam Shield. Install it in your kids' phones so that they don't get scammed. That's also something that's very useful to have. And I also installed that in my daughter's phone as well. So just teach them how to stay safe online. More importantly, of course, is make sure that they know that when they encounter something that makes them feel uncomfortable, anxious, they know to come back to you, right? They know to come back to you, or they know how to seek help from a trusted adult. So that is something that is very important there. So you don't want to be in a situation where they see something or they encounter something online and they don't tell you about it. So one of the things that we want to do is in terms of modeling, being a role model for cyber safety entails that. The second thing that we want to talk about is role model how to use our devices and social media. So I earlier on I talked about how I set this up my son, right? That is one of the ways that we can do it. The other thing that we can do is we can teach our children how to communicate well during using various apps and social media platforms. So my daughter is still learning how to communicate well on WhatsApp, because she thinks like one word responses on WhatsApp, right, is like appropriate. So I ask her, hey, you finished already or not? Then she say, wait. I think she thinks that it's okay to respond to daddy like that, because he understands where I'm coming from. But I think by and large, especially when they first start in their journey on in cyberspace, using all of these technologies, they don't know what might be rude or what might not be rude. So I think one of the roles that we can play is role model how then we can respond to another in a respectful manner, so that when they respond to their friends, they also respond in a way that doesn't seem that's quite rude. And I mean, aside from responding to peers, also show them how you can use these platforms to stay in touch with family and friends, and how they can be used, for example, social media to consolidate information for their interests. So I think especially so because of COVID, right? A lot of us do. You know, the first year was Zoom Raya, right? So everyone was doing Hari Raya over Zoom. So that's a good way, a very good example of us using technology positively, and it's good that the kids actually know that. So much so that now, like my daughter, sometimes she asks for permission to be able to Zoom her friends while they are doing homework. So no need to go to each other's house anymore to do homework. They can just Zoom and they can do homework together, and they can have that discussion and be with their friends online as well. So very interesting. But we need to role model that that healthy use of devices and behavior. Um, Now, also pertaining a little bit more about social media posting. So as our teens, older teens, they start posting a little bit more on social media. They want to comment, they want to like, especially when they want to comment. Try to remind them to think before they post. Think is this very nice framework that we have in MOE. To really think about whether what they are sharing or they're posting, whether it's true, whether it's helpful, inspiring, necessary, or kind. Sometimes kids, teens, they tend to post for the sake of posting. We want them to be a bit more discerning in what they post. So I think it's a very useful framework. We want them to be able to do something positively online. Thirdly, in terms of what parents can do at home, please show interest. If your older child or teen is reluctant to share what they're doing online, try talking to them about your own digital media use. You know, ask them questions about your experiences while using certain apps. Then it might be a good way uh, of asking them about their interests and their likes or their dislikes. So like for example, right, if you see like my household, like, always like we on TikTok or we on IG, we see like a funny cat post and we say, hey, look at this, so cute, right, this cat. And then that obviously the doctor is gonna say, yeah, that's quite cute. And that actually leads to that conversation about, so what are you looking at online and stuff like that. And that would be a very useful strategy, I think. I always try to advocate for this idea of, you know, if you're really not sure what you're going to or what you want to say, just ask, like, you know, for your child, just like, adik buat apa tu? And then if they're willing to share, then that's the start of the conversation. And I keep talking about conversations because really the critical thing is you need to have regular conversations with your children. And and this is very important because especially when they are exploring new digital tools and platforms for learning or leisure, get to a habit of asking them what they're doing online. If you see them on their devices or on laptops, you see them looking at YouTube, ask them why are you watching YouTube, right? So it might be something for entertainment, so be it. Just have that conversation. If you see them using our social SLS, right? Just ask them, oh, why are you learning on SLS? So we're all very familiar with this, and they should be willing to share about some of these things. If there's a concern about the amount of time, which everyone has concern about the amount of time the kids spend on devices, talk to them about it. It's okay to start that conversation. Raise the idea of having a screen use contract or agreement. If it's regarding their personal learning device at secondary school, they get their PLDs, right, the personal device, and you're concerned, talk to them about it. See whether you want to tap on the device management app or DMA for screen time control. More importantly, this idea of connection before correction, because we want to have conversations with our children about what they enjoy, but we also want to encourage them to join screen-free activities, right? And if there is and really at the crux of this connection versus before correction, right? Don't just straight away scold them, like what our colleagues at Mendaki shared in the running slide, the opening slides. One of a second tip that they talked about is this idea of don't scold or solve their problems immediately, right? There is always something else, but there is always something else. And so it is good to actually try to listen a little bit more, listen to empathy, hear them out a little bit more before you start correcting them. And there are, of course, some ways of correcting that is better than others, right? So back to device use again. if there's concerns about device use at home, create family rules that apply to everyone. So for example, the one that I have at home is no devices at dinner table, right? So that means my daughter will put her devices aside. I will put my devices aside. My wife sometimes forgets to put her device, but I will remind her, then she'll put it aside. Because we want to role model, right? And then like what I shared earlier, especially for the older children or the teens, you know, they want their voices to be heard. Just ask them how they feel about your devices. Have you thought about that? How are you using devices in front of them? Because sometimes you tell them you're using your devices too long, and then kind of like also on device as well, right? So what's the impression you are giving your child? So just be a bit more a bit mindful of that. It's a challenge sometimes. What I do sometimes when I'm using some of these of my devices, I will share with them what I'm doing, like got narrative like that. So daddy is actually doing some research for work, right, on parenting. So like preparing for today's talk. Like, oh, okay. So they know that I'm not using it for fun. But if I'm using it for fun, it's like then I'll say I'm using it for fun. So yeah, I'm watching some TikTok videos on cats. So that's okay because then they know that there will be a time for play, there will be time for work. But we want them to know what you're doing so that when we ask them or when they are we want them to be able to ask us what are we doing, how they think about our own device habits. And this actually leads to good conversations and can change behaviors. Oof, I'm mindful of time. So before I end, I will start the Q&A. Just want to quickly share resources that we have to support parents, the MOE has to support parents. We have the MOE parent kits that's available on there. So there's different parent kits that we have, including one on raising a digitally smart child. If you are not following MOE's parenting on Instagram, please do so. At parentingwith.moesg, a lot of good materials on parenting gets pushed out on that platform. We also have parenting resources on Parent Gateway. So all of you have Parents Gateway, right? So if you realize that there's something there's a repository of articles there that you can click. We also have Schoolbag articles. So schoolbag.edu.sg is a repository of all education related articles, videos, infographics, right, pertaining to parenting, digital lifestyle, and many more. I talk about the importance of social emotional skills. So we do have social emotional resources for parents. So check that out at that link over there. You can scan the QR code. Also, we want to highlight that we work together with the Ministry of Communications and Information, MCI and IMDA, Infocom Media Development Authority, and the Media Literacy Council, MLC. And we share their resources on various topics such as digital wellness, digital literacy, on these two platforms. So you may want to check them out as well. And we also want to share that aside from the resources that MOE has and our partner agency has, schools also work with various community groups to run workshops for parents. This might be in terms of cyber wellness, resilience building, so on and so forth. And this will actually help parents reinforce the social emotional competencies taught in school in the various CC lessons as well. So I think resources are very useful and for you parents today. And I think with that, I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Sorry for talking for so long. We now open the session for Q&A. I think some of you, I believe, will have typed up your questions on Zoom. If you have not done so already, please type them out on Zoom, and our colleagues from Mendaki will highlight them for me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Henry, for that wonderful sharing. I think I learned so much. Parents, as Mr. Henry has said, please share your questions on the Zoom chat so that our colleagues can collate, and then we can also address them later on. But as you are sharing your questions and typing in your questions, maybe just let me do a brief recap of what Mr. Henry has shared earlier in his slide. So you talked about adolescents' development and how it's a time for them to form their own identities. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, I was a 90s kid. So at that time, there was Britney Spears. And I remember her song was not a girl, not yet a woman. So I think this, I mean, in Britney Spears' song, it's a different context, but I think for this context, it's just that because our teenagers are just right at the middle where they're no longer children, they are not adults, but they are trying to form their own identity. They want to see who are they really? What am I? Who am I to a certain person? Who am I to my parents? Who am I as an individual? So just as Mr. Henry has shared, right? He talked about asserting independence. They want to have autonomy of things. They don't want to be forced to do something because they want to know that I am in power to make changes for my own life and for other people as well. And I suppose at this time, right, Mr. Henry, children or these teens, they are always seeking for role models, right? So if parents are not around, they are maybe busy with their other responsibilities and they're not present in their children's life. And then sometimes these teenagers might just seek out role models elsewhere. And I think this is something that that is worrying for parents, right, Mr. Henry, as you have said, because parents need to be there and parents have a role to play as well. You shared a lot about the curriculum, the CCE curriculum by MOE, and I think perhaps parents, you can breathe a sigh of relief a little bit to know that your children, if they are in MOE schools, they are in good hands because they have been taught in the curriculum about behaviors that they need to share, behaviors that they need to maybe reflect, some of the things and values that they need to also exhibit. You talk a lot about tech and social media, and I think this is important not just for students, but also for parents ourselves. And I think about, the usage of about cyber wellness, about usage of social media, about etiquette. And I think these ugly behaviors, if you don't clamp them early, they will still exhibit when you're adults. And you see all these kinds of nonsense on social media today. And this nonsense, as I call it, these are the nonsense that your children are looking at. So if you don't talk to them, engage them, and I think this is something that parents really need to take a huge stand, a huge role in trying to model this kind of good behaviors for their children. So I think we are ready for our Q&A bit. We have our first question here. So maybe if you can share it on screen. All right, so our first question, Mr. Henry, for you is, how can parents help their children develop independence and decision-making skills while still being supportive and involved?
So I think thanks for that question, Shafika. I was like looking at the chat. Oh, it's a lot of very exciting chats happening at the site. Yeah, it's very interesting. Good to know that we are all concerned about our children. Some of you are encouraging one another. It's very heartening to see that happening. Going to this question, how can parents help young children develop independence and decision-making skills while still being supportive and involved? I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that at this age, while they are like what I mentioned earlier, they are looking for some form of autonomy, and whether or not we like it, they will continue to do so. And what we can really do is we can actually be that good base for them. So when you're being supportive and involved, just have that open conversation with them, be empathetic, listen to them, and just be open to whatever they are sharing with you. And I go back to the point that I shared earlier, jangan selalu marah, kan? Don't just always get angry at the kids. It is the age whereby they are trying to figure stuff out. So there will definitely be things that they struggle with, and then it will be something that it's not that's something that you don't like. So they need to see that you are the anchor or that base, that you are still supportive. You don't have to do too much, unless there are certain things that you want to guide them, like what I mentioned earlier. You want to guide them in terms of how to respond properly, like on WhatsApp. Sure, you do teach them, and then you tell them that no, actually when you do it like that, it's good, right? We don't want to do that. We can do better. And they will be appreciative of that as well. But I think as they start to become a little more independent, they start making errors and stuff like that. Most importantly is just be there, just listen, just support them. If there is an issue, so MOE has this frame called SPACE, SPACE. It's called support, problem solve with, affirm, cheer, and empower. So like what I mentioned, support is you are there to support them while they are going through adolescence. Problem solve with, if they come to you, you help them problem solve together, not problem solve for, together, problem solve with. Affirm them when they're doing positive things, cheer them on. You see them struggling, but then you're trying to show that they can do better. Empower them, and of course, um, instead of waiting for them to also, you know that it's going to happen. So instead of waiting for them to like do their own things, why not give them opportunities to make decisions as well? So that's yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. So when you mentioned about letting them make decisions, like how can parents do this at home? What are some steps that you think we can do?
Oh, so I mean, in schools, we always let our kids, our students, make decisions, but then you actually are controlling the decisions, lah. So you give them options which are both beneficial in some way, or to meet your own, or to meet the needs of the family. But it's still the decision. So for example, when it's movie night in my household, it's movie night, I'll tell my daughter, so do you want to watch this, something that I think is appropriate, or do you want to watch something that your brother wants to watch, right? Because that will mean that in both ways, you are telling her that, okay, she can choose something that as a family we agree that it's nice and fun to watch, or you can give this opportunity to let your brother choose. So showing that bigger, being that bigger sister, right? Yeah, let Adik choose whatever he wants to watch. So in that sense, that starts that process. I guess when it's older and you have a bit more confidence in your kids, and you're like and you want to go as a family, then you give them the option of, so where do you want to go today? You want to go to East Coast Park, or do you want to go to West Coast Park? Or you want to go to Sentosa, for example? So some of these small things, and then follow through. So don't say, don't give them the opportunity to make the decisions, and then after that say, no lah, Ayah, don't think I want to go to East Coast Park today. But then you already decided, right? So when you betray their trust in that way, right, that's where they feel a little bit more disheartened and less trusting of you. Then how are you going to be that base of to support your child when they're starting to lose that trust in you?
Right. I think that's really relevant, because I think perhaps in this day and age, parents are always trying to be perfect. You know, they want to achieve this level of perfection that they perhaps see on social media from other parents. So they don't want to make mistakes in parenting, or maybe just in their lives. So they are too maybe fixated on this perfection that they don't allow maybe some autonomy by their children, maybe allow them to make some decisions for the family. I think that's a really good start for parents. Like maybe parents, tonight, if you are ordering in for dinner, maybe you can just ask your child, okay, what do you want to eat? If let's say they want to eat something unhealthy, then must accept lah, Mr. Henry, right? Yeah, that's great tip for parents. We also parents. So on that note, please also share your questions on the Zoom chat. There's a lot of discussions going on, and I think it's perfect because we can always learn from one another. We have a second question as well, if you can see it on screen, perhaps. Okay, the second question is regarding YouTube and TikTok videos on tweens reaction videos. They indirectly influence our teens and how they act and speak. What is your opinion on this, Henry?
This question. I saw it in the chat just now. So my daughter, dia tak ada lah. She has gotten into this habit of calling everyone bruh. So like the mother's goes to get called bruh. Then I also get called bruh. So but it's I feel that, so on one hand, she does that because she's comfortable. Right, it's like, bruh, why you like that? And that is cool because she's excited, she's funny, all that, right? So it's like, I don't know where I asked her many times, where do you get this from? Then she's not able to exactly pinpoint. I think all her friends are also talking the same way. How then do we try to correct this behavior? So to one end, I always Yeah, so funny. I see all the comments here. So I, on one hand, I don't think it is inappropriate. I don't say it's inappropriate because I always get it from her when she is in a joyous state. She's laughing. It's always very funny. So it's something that I know she's saying because she feels comfortable with me and my wife. Right. So to me, that's very heartening. Oh, she's doing it because she's comfortable. Right. But on the other hand, I know it might not be so appropriate. So we do correct her. And she again, but for the most part, she does address us all okay and stuff like that. It's just that when she's excitable, right? I think one of the things that we realize or we need to appreciate is we have, pasal kita parents kan, we can guide the behavior of our kids. So on one hand, don't say don't think that you can't do that. If there are certain things that you think are not appropriate, or like like I think it's okay. But if you don't think it's okay, then you just tell them, I don't think that's an appropriate way to talk to ayah, right? Or I don't think that's appropriate to talk to ibu, right? You can talk to that like that with your friends. They will get it. They will slip once in a while, but again, let's not over. By and large, if they're being respectful, like generally, and they're not doing things out of being hurtful, out of malice, I'm generally okay with some of these behaviors. I want to go back to something that Shafika talked about in terms of the idea of parents being perfectionist, someone everything perfect, right? We are also under great influence of social comparisons, our parents. Pasal kita tengok dengan lives of all the people we follow on IG, right? It really does seem that they live a perfect life. Tapi what we see on IG is, it's curated kan. It's not their actual lives. So be mindful of that, be appreciative of that. Everyone also will have challenges. I also have challenges, you also have challenges. The other thing that I want to talk about with regard to that is, I think most of us, we parent how we think parenting should be like. So why is this very important now? It's because when we grow up, we know we know how it is to grow up without technology, right? Pasal last time when I came back home, right, what I did was like adik turun bawah main bola, so I just go downstairs, and that's how we spend I spent like 2-3 hours downstairs playing soccer, right, at the void deck. But the kids nowadays, they don't come home and say, I'm going to go play soccer downstairs. No, their soccer comes something else, right? And so the challenge is, and I feel maybe 1 or 2 more generations or generation of parents, right? They know what it is growing up in a digital space. So the parents who are younger here and you grew up in a digital space, good for you. You know all the challenges that arise from digital space. The parents like me who are a bit older, who have that discrepancy, I know what this offline and online. Our best sensing of what's normal for in terms of digital technology and the digital space, right? Not the best. We don't have the best idea and example of what to do, what cannot do, what is too much, what is too little. So we don't have that. So just be a bit mindful. Younger parents, I think you will have encountered all these challenges because when you grow up, you're using social media, use it wrongly, right? And then you go see the things on social media. You also learn that you can tell your kids, oh, last time I also got macam ni. But I don't do that, okay? Yeah. So yeah, to that end, I will just stop there. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Henry. And I think so I shall call you bro now, huh? Like you're not to forget, Mr. Henry. But I mean, that's really a way for them to express themselves, right? Sometimes if it's not malintent, there's no rudeness there, and we are okay with that, then I think it is something that bonds the relationship between the parent and child. But if, let's say, for the moment they have already stepped over the line, maybe they are starting to call names or they're showing disrespect. So I think that's where parents have to step in and say, okay, this is not right. We cannot call each other this. You cannot call anyone that. And then you draw that boundary. You draw that line, right? And I think as children, they need to be guided. They need to know what is okay to do, what is not okay to do. They may just step over the line sometimes. But as parents, we need to rein them back in and say, okay, this is not okay. And then they would know, okay, next time I cannot call my dad this, or I cannot call my mommy this, right? Yeah, and I think that's really, really good tip. So, okay, maybe bro is okay. Other names cannot, parents? Right. Okay. I understand that we have reached 12 o'clock already, but our chat is really just erupting with a lot of sharings, a lot of questions. So maybe parents, is it okay if we extend a little bit, maybe 12:15? We try to address all of your concerns and questions before we take leave from the session. Some parents say, I'm not your bro. Okay, so this parent cannot, your child cannot call you bro. Something else can. Right. Okay. So maybe let's go on to the next question. Okay. Yes, we have here. Our teens feel we parents are not cool if you are not on social media and do not learn the lingo. Hence, they do not look up to us as role model and instead follow what the influencers, YouTubers are like. So, Mr. Henry, any tips for parents?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it really highlights some of the concerns that parents may have with not being on social media. Um, so um, so again, this idea of role modeling, right? What can we role model for our kids? Um, they we so okay, we don't want to be something. We don't want them to be exactly like us, but we want them to be able to see uh, what they can become. So for example, right? For example, kalau kita solat, right? So I will purposefully try to solat like in the open, so that so that they can see, oh, ayah solat, right? So that they recognize that it is time. So like, lay it out and then after that, oh, okay, it is time. So that to me is that really at the core of it, right? Who you are or what the type of person that you want to be. If you're respectful to your so my mother-in-law stays with me, I'm respectful, very respectful for my mother-in-law. They see how to communicate, right? These are the things that your children have seen in you from the time they were born. We need to recognize that adolescents, they are finding their own identity. So we we don't need to be overly hung up on the fact that they don't want to look at us as role models. Sometimes it's not obvious. And sometimes it's the things that is the most not obvious things that they will pick up. Kalau kita selalu marah like our wives, or like our elderly, the older folks, then somehow you realize that your child will start also talking back to you, giving you attitude. They may have picked it up from somewhere. So don't worry too much about what is cool on social media. They are finding their own way. So ultimately, at the end of the day, they have this identity that they have seen from you. Okay, this is what it means to be what it means to be a son or daughter of like Mr. Henry, right? But this is also what it means to be a student of a school. But this is also what it means to be someone who does in my soccer team, right? So all of these things, or like this is my identity on social media, right? Because I have a platform, I post funny stuff, and they're all trying to find their identity and trust the process. They will somehow one way or another, after adolescence, they will come to something. Like what I mentioned, most of them do, right? So even if you are not cool or you don't think you are cool, right? You don't think you're cool lah, tapi your anak, I don't know lah. Maybe your kids think that you're quite cool, so they just don't say it because shy, right? But you have that great influence on them. Trust that through adolescence, you expect all of these things, they will land somewhere. But if there's concerns, like in terms of if they're not landing where they are where they should be and they're struggling, then that's where we start come in. Like what I mentioned earlier, we can guide behavior, right? If there's some things that you don't like, you can tell them these are some things I don't like. Yeah. And I think that will be useful. But trust, I think two things. Trust that we have already been a role model for kids for their whole life already. And it is also a time and space for them to find their own identity. And adolescence is the time whereby when you're sorting it out, you will expect a bit of tensions there. Yeah. So that's my take on that.
Right, thank you, Mr. Henry. So it just means that parents, we really need to model the kind of values that we want to see in our children. And then after that, it's like, okay, we let them go and then let them figure things out through their, experiences, what they see, what their friends do. And then they will start to think, okay, this might not be the best thing. Maybe what my mommy and daddy is doing at home is right. Right. So they eventually would come to that after everything is settled. They see this constant presence in their lives, what these constant role models are doing, these good values that they show, and then eventually they will come to that. Hopefully, right, Mr. Henry? Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a good affirmation from Mr. Henry. So parents, don't worry. Your children, inshallah, in good hands if you show them what it is to be or what are the values that they need to model themselves. Great. Okay, so but there's just one thing in this question about maybe if you can go back to the previous question about the parents saying that they are not on social media. So, Mr. Henry, do you think it is important for parents to be on social media or not? What do you think?
Um, well, I feel that it depends on what you use social media for. I personally feel that it's not necessary to be on social media. Um, I mean, I can say that the only reason why I'm on social media is so that it's for work purposes. The reason why I install games on my phone is also for work purposes lah, because it's like what I do, right? But um and I use social media for news aggregation. So like all the stuff that I want to information on, I use that. But if you're not on social media and you have other ways of because I got friends who are not on social media, they use like things like Flipbook to consolidate their news. That's fine. If you are also not on social media and you want to be aware of some of the trends that are out there, it might be a bit challenging, but I would think of like if you want to know a little bit more about trends and don't know where to go, try Common Sense Media. It's a US-based website that Common Sense Media. It's a US-based website that has summaries of games, social media, some of the risks associated with social media and stuff like that, some of the trends that the kids are going through right now, what's in, what's out. So you need to know where to find information about what is happening in the kids' lives lah. Yeah. So not necessarily to be on social media, but so that you are a bit more updated. That's one way of doing that. Because the other way, which is I think might be even better, is just have conversations with your child about what's new, what's in. Can you teach me about acronyms on this? Yeah. What are your friends posting? What is the current trending thing on TikTok? I think that is useful and maybe useful conversation starters as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I think in order for us to understand what our children are going through, and as they are always online, right, on social media, we do need to understand what social media is, even though we might not necessarily have to be there and be present there ourselves. We could just have a conversation with them just to understand, because as they say, the enemy that you see is always easier to eliminate than the enemy that you don't, right? So if let's say we take let's say being online on the internet as an enemy, and we want to teach our children how to really use this tool, then we really need to know what is this tool about, right, Mr. Henry? Thank you very much for that. We have another question. Maybe if you can take a look. Yes, okay. So why do our teenagers get angry or agitated easily for no apparent reason? Okay, this is something interesting. Yes, I do see a lot of angry teenagers, especially angry teenagers to their parents. Some parents here are nodding their head. So, Mr. Henry, what are your tips or maybe answer to this question? Yeah.
Okay. That's a very interesting question. Thanks for this question. Angry and agitated for easily no reason. Yeah, yes. I get it. I kena sometimes already. Daughter comes home and then she's suddenly very emo. And I was like, what's wrong? And nothing and stuff like that. So again, I go back to very earlier on in my talk. I talked about brain development. Neuroscience gives us a certain idea of why this might be happening. In terms of the development, in terms of brain development, the limbic system, which is more centered around the emotions, impulsivity. It becomes a little bit more developed than our prefrontal cortex that manages all of these emotions and impulsive behavior. And therefore, what happens more in a more immediate term is they can be just moody, or they can just be angry, agitated. It might be just because someone said something, or they're just thinking about it, or thinking about something that happened like 3 or 4 hours ago, and then suddenly it just comes out, right? It happens. And I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is when the teen is going through that, it's a bad time to talk to them. You can try lah. Try to reach out if they want and are ready to talk about it, then that's great. If they are not ready to talk about it, it's okay. Because in terms of, like what I mentioned, in terms of brain development, the first instinct is the emotion, the emotive part, right? But once that kind of settles down, and their prefrontal cortex takes over, and they become a little bit more cognizant about things, then it might be useful then to start that conversation with them. So talking with angry teenagers, so I mean, especially as a teacher, right? Talking with a very angry student, it takes you nowhere. You need to think about raising this up at another appropriate time and space lah. Right. Of course, it becomes problematic when they get really when it's like an outburst, or like it's a meltdown but that is really at the extreme end of the spectrum lah. And I think with regard to that, one of the things that I feel that is useful to do is doing some grounding techniques. Ask them questions that are more like cognitive, in a sense, reminding them to breathe. So what I used to do is with some of my students at secondary school is when they start getting very angry, I will just tell them, like, it's like, okay, what's 12 times 10? It's like very random. They are like very agitated, and then I'm like, what? Then you'll be like, what? What's 12 times 10? 120. Then you ask, what's 3 plus 3 plus 3? Then they're like, what? Then so what's happening there is you are forcing them to engage their prefrontal cortex, because when they're doing some of these calculations, you need to kind of switch modes, and that can help calm them down as well. So that's in the classroom setting. I don't expect you, because I'm a math teacher, I don't expect you to do so in your setting. Breathing helps, but I think when it really becomes very problematic, it requires a different type of intervention. So if they're just agitated and stuff, no reason, talk to them at another time. If you're not willing to talk now. So that's my response to this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henry. So your tip is to maybe ask a math question. If I was angry, Mr. Henry, please, this doesn't work to me because if you are telling me how to do a math question when I'm angry, I'll probably get angrier. So I think this will not work for me. So parents, if your child is like me, don't try. But if your child is maybe like Mr. Henry, you can try that method. Perhaps that works for you. Right. So perhaps if we can just maybe wrap up this session with a question to Mr. Henry. My question to Mr. Henry now. There have so many things here that parents have to do. We have our maybe daily jobs for us, and then after we come back, then we have to have responsibilities at home, and then we have to speak to our children, and then we need to know what's going on social media. There's so many thousand different things for us to do, right? And I am sure a lot of parents here are overwhelmed, and then it doesn't help when your child doesn't want to speak to you or slam the door at you, right? So how then can we take some maybe small baby steps, actionable steps for us to maybe bridge a better relationship with our child, maybe build a better home environment for them? Any tips, Ms. Henry?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's I mean, I also recognize that it is very, very challenging now. You come home from work and then you're very tired. One of the things that I am very mindful of, my wife also reminds me as well, is we need to be aware of our own emotions first. So as a parent, we need to be aware of how we are feeling, whether we are feeling very horrible, it's been a bad day at work, and recognize that. So self-awareness of your own emotions is very important, because Kalau dah penat, habis you balik rumah, and then your kids are being hyper irritating, right? You will more than likely want to snap, right? But having the awareness, like realizing that, hey, I'm very tired. I know if something happened, I'm gonna snap. That's the first step, I feel. And that leads you, or that lands you to a place whereby you can like, okay, if I really cannot, I need to tell the kids that, hey, I need to be of time, okay? And then you take the time. There's no shame or no harm taking time off from your kids. I think the reality of it, if it's really a bad day, just take a bit of time, calm yourselves, manage your own anxiety and emotions first, and then be ready to see them. And what has always been helpful for me is like when I come home and I know I'm going to be like in a state, and because I have that awareness, right, I will psych myself up to be like a better parent. I cannot get angry. Okay. Then after that, but the problem with that is like I happy kids all go to sleep and then I crash also, because it takes a lot of effort on our part. It does. Especially when you have all of these things that are happening at the back. You try to be there, you want to have conversation with your kids. Then after that is like I mean, like for me, after all of that, I crash. Like, oh my god, penatnya. Okay. Have an early night. But I think first and foremost, just be aware of your own emotions first, because that will dictate your whole entire experience when you come back. When you come back home.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Henry, for wrapping up this entire session. Parents, I think there's a lot of things on our plate. So I think from Mr. Henry's advice is just for us to take stock of ourselves first before we start to parent, because there's a lot of load on us that we have to accomplish, that we have in a whole day. There's so many things that we have to achieve, right? So going home, then we have to take stock of ourselves, of our emotions, and then we engage. Because I know parenting is very challenging. So parents, don't worry, everybody's on the same boat. We are all in this together. So we hope that with this little nuggets of tips and advice that Mr. Henry has shared, I think perhaps you can try out and see whether it works. Just take some baby steps to build that kind of relationship and an environment at home for your child to be comfortable in. All right, so Mr. Henry, thank you so much for that sharing today. And I think a lot of parents have benefited from that. The chat session is just going on here with a lot of advice from other fellow parents and tips that other parents can also learn. And I think that's wonderful, because really we need an entire community to build a good environment for our society, and our kids need this to see this kind of supportive and positive society and environment, so that they can then grow up and build that very positive environment as well. So I think before we end our session here, we have a feedback form as well for our parents. So if you enjoy this session, if you think you have benefited from this session and you want more of such sessions, parents, please fill in this feedback form here. And I think my colleagues will also share in the chat for you to complete. Maybe let us know what you feel about the session. Is it good? Is it not good? You want more of this session? Any specific topics that you think would be beneficial for you, please do share here as well. At the same time, I think we like to share some upcoming programs as well that we have. Right, so we have our upcoming Mendaki Cyber Homework ACE. This is an ongoing program by Mendaki to support your child in their homework. So if you have any primary 4 to primary 6 child, or in Sec 1 or 2, you can also enroll them in this to get some support for their homework. Additionally, also we have an upcoming Parents Guide to program for parents to join. So this is a combined session for parents and the children. So we have a parent session to support your child to focus, and a success in PSLE session for primary 5 to 6 students on building self-confidence and achieving high aspirations as well, that you can also register now if you are interested, or if this benefits you. So thank you so much, parents and Mr. Henry, for being here today. I think I've learned a lot. I think for myself, I've learned a lot. I think parents here have learned a lot as well. There's a lot of materials and resources that Mr. Henry has shared. So don't worry, parents, we will send you all these links via email late at the end of the session later today, or perhaps sometime next week, where we can consolidate all the resources and materials as well. But before we end, let's have a group shot together. Right, parents, so those of you who are maybe in your baju butterfly, maybe we will like quickly change so we can have a quick group shot together. All right, my colleagues all ready? Okay, right. So maybe by the count of 3 then. 1, 2, smile. All right. Thank you so much, parents, for today's session. I hope you will join in for our upcoming sessions. And I think, I hope that this session has been beneficial to you as it has for me. Thank you, Mr. Henry, for being a wonderful, wonderful speaker, sharing with us not just what you do at work, but also how you parent at home. And I think these are just some tips that we can learn and perhaps try at our home too. All right, so parents, I know we have overshot a little bit, but I hope it has been beneficial for you. So have a good end of day, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.